Believe it or not, there is a leak for Hermann Prime's skills in-game, and it's in the most unlikely of places. It's in Theodora's skill description describing poison effects. So it's pretty much confirmed that Hermann Prime is going to be a poison commander, but there's actually a lot we can take away from that about the future of cavalry and infantry and archers, and I'm going to break all that down for you in this video, so stick around for all the things you need to know to prepare for Hermann Prime. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and when Smite Damage was released in the game, I was just very confused as to why infantry, which seemed like the shielding commanders, were getting now also a normal attack mechanic as well. So infantry are your shielders, and they are also your counter attackers or normal attackers. And then what is the gimmick for archers? Well, it seems like the developers are moving in on the poison game plan. If you look in the iOS version of Rise of Kingdoms, this is not in the PC client. I checked. It might be in the Android client. I haven't looked yet. But this skill for Theodora describes the poison effect. And it says, the poison effect is influenced by Tommy, as well as by Hermann Prime's Mandrake Root and Forest of the Fallen Eagle skills. So this reveals to us we have two skills on Hermann Prime related to poison effects. And there's a bunch of ways that this could work. This could be the active skill and a passive skill. This could be the active skill and the expertise skill. This could be the passive skill and the expertise skill, right? Like, we don't know exactly how this goes, but we know that Hermann Prime is doing some amount of poison. And I feel like this is a strong signal the developers are getting back to the roots of what archers are supposed to be, which is big fat skill damage and ideally area of effect. So what does this actually mean, though, poison damage? Well, we have one poison damage commander in the game, and those who know that poison damage is actually insane. What do I mean by that? When Baba fought Leopard, okay, both players are like over 500 million power, total Krakens. They had a very, how do I say this, amped up duel, a lot of passion around who was going to win that duel. Baba brought Tommy, and he won. And it's not a coincidence that poison is basically making it so the target takes more skill damage. You can focus out troops really quickly with elevated skill damage, which means anything you're swarming is going to freaking pop. That's what poison does. So on Tommy, the way this works is when your troop launches a basic attack, you have a 100% chance to inflict poison on the target for 5 seconds. Now, this poison stack can be stacked up to 15 times, and its duration resets whenever you get a new stack. So the more you're stacking up poison, the better. You can make it so the target is taking an upwards of 45% skill damage. That's 3% per stack. And I would assume that this is just the way poison works. When we use the word poison, it is a stack that always would refresh for the 5-second duration, and I would assume can always stack 15 times. Like, I think this description of poison is likely to just not just be how it works on Tommy, but probably how it works in other places. Now, the trick to Tommy is that she actually will remove the poison stacks and do extra damage based on the removal of those stacks. But if we key back into Kraken's locking in on Tommy being amazing, let's talk about Yoda 808. Strongest player by power in the game. When he 7x swarms a flag, he always brings a Tommy. And that is because the skill damage debuff is so good. It offsets all the other stuff that's going on with this commander that's honestly a little bit suboptimal. And the other thing that Tommy does, by the way, that is really good is a passive debuff for a defense reduction. Important to remember, a 30% defense reduction on a passive skill is pretty freaking legit. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Hermann Prime and the poison effect. Now, funny enough, there's actually another place we can find a description of the poison effect, and that is on Pakal. Pakal clears debuffs as well. Here's poison. Twice in game we see Hermann Prime's got Mandrake Root and Forest of the Fallen Eagle skill. I mean, unless the developers have announced that Hermann Prime is coming and announced that Ashur Ben Apala is coming, but haven't put any of the skills in game yet, or maybe these are placeholder names or whatever. It's just so unlikely. Like, we can find, you'd have to jump through more hoops to justify this being fake than it being super real. Like, this looks super real to me. So what does this mean for Hermann Prime? Well, first of all, I want to talk about archers being skill damage dealers just for a moment, okay? We know that Tommy's all about skill damage. We know that Boudica Prime makes it so the target on her active skill takes more skill damage. Heck, I mean, if we just flip this view to archers, right? Archers are all about skill damage dealt. If we go way back into the history of archers, here we've got Esong manipulating skill damage on the 4th skill, 50% skill damage boost. If we get a look at Cyrus the Great, manipulating skill damage, reducing the target's skill damage dealt. We've already talked about Tommy. We need to talk about Henry. Henry makes it so that the target, when you're swarming a garrison or rallying a garrison, they take more skill damage. So archers have been manipulating skill damage for like a really long time. Like, so many of them do stuff with skill damage. Doesn't the most do something with skill damage? Am I mistaken? Is there a skill here that does that? 10% chance to increase skill damage the target receives. Yeah. So like, archers have been manipulating skill damage for a long time. And I feel like the developers are kind of realizing, hey, you know what? Let's move in on that. That's their gimmick. That's their thing. Archers are about skill damage. And it's funny, we were like this far into the game, and only now do we have the things that let us focus this much with commanders on doing certain gimmicks. But I think archers are just moving fully in that skill damage direction. I mean, let's not even begin to talk about Zhuge Liang with a skill damage boost, right? So archers are moving in the direction of skill damage, and we know that Hermann Prime has already been announced to be what? Archer and versatility and support? And we know that Ashurbanipal is archer skill conquering, right? So if Ashurbanipal is archer skill conquering, and Hermann Prime, we already see, has skill damage. I mean, I think it's unlikely the new archers now have smite damage. And it's funny because I was like, oh man, smite damage is like going to be the thing that all commanders are doing. It could be. Maybe not. Maybe not. So if you're bought into the idea that perhaps it's unlikely that archers are going to have smite damage, the new ones anyways, and if you're bought into the idea that perhaps archers are going to be all about skill damage moving forward, what are the implications? And let's talk about the way poison stacks work. So if you have multiple Tommies hitting the target today, what those Tommies are going to do is they're going to stack up poison. Then whichever one fires off their active skill first is going to clear all the poison stacks off the target. Okay? And then whenever the next one does their active skill, they're going to clear all those poison stacks off the target, whatever is accrued yet again onto the target. But we don't know if Hermann is going to have a mechanism to remove poison. He may just poison the target, and that could be good enough. So I would assume, perhaps, that Hermann stacks might be permanent. Although if we look at other commanders, it's unusual to see a stacking effect ultimately end up being permanent necessarily. I mean, for example, you've got Tommy, she clears her stacks, and then the most recent addition that we've got to this sort of skill damage taken family here is actually infantry, and you look at Sargon. And even with him, they're like, yeah, you apply stacks and then you clear stacks, right? You apply the odd debuff, and then you clear off the odd debuff. So I think given that we see 2 skills listing poison, it is likely to mean that those poison stacks will ultimately get cleared, which makes it sort of funky because, you know, look, the first time we got a poison commander, you know who it was paired with. I mean, this was a total flop, but it was Edward of Woodstock. And Edward of Woodstock, actually at the time, I mean, I was there, Edward of Woodstock was actually terrifying. He was the rally. He was the thing you used, man. He was a beast. He was actually amazing at the time he was released. He really has not stood the test of time in a really unimpressive way, but you wouldn't actually rally back in the day with Edward of Woodstock and Tommy. You know, the thing you rallied with was Edward of Woodstock and Esong. At the time, that was better. But the magic of the two together is that he had a slower rage cycle, so you could get more stacks of poison applied. So is it possible in this insane rage meta that we've been working on and through for a long time that Ashurbanipal will actually have a higher rage requirement? I mean, it's possible. Here we see Archer versatility skill. Okay, I mean, Archer and then conquering and skill. You could go for a higher rage requirement on Ashurbanipal, and you pair with Hermann Prime. It's possible. I generally prefer when the game does not go in the direction of sort of insisting with the game design that two commanders have to be paired together to get value. I much prefer when there's a lot more flexibility with regard to who can pair with whom. But, you know, that setting aside my preference here, I would bet, if I had to bet money, that because we know that Hermann Prime has 2 poison-related skills, that there's going to be 1 skill related to applying the poison and 1 skill related to removing the poison. So, will Hermann Prime be really, really good? I mean, if he's manipulating skill damage, he is going to be really, really good. And what does this mean for Smite Damage commanders? I mean, bro, like, we have these Smite Damage commanders that have showed up. Are they dead in the water? And I would say no. The weirdness of these Smite Damage commanders, and I covered this a little bit in yesterday's video, is that they do so much counterattack, it's insane. And Liu Che does enough damage, AoE damage, that you're in a great spot with, the Gorgo Liu Che combo being really good. So the weirdness here is that this combo, Gorgo and Liu Che, is actually going to be as prickly as Pakal Herald in terms of getting tons of value with counterattack, but also does great AoE damage. So it's just, I mean, imagine Pakal Herald, but it does like proper, like not passive, but proactive area of effect damage. Like, the combo's insane. Okay, I think it's still going to be insane, but I also think your skill damage dealers get a really healthy head nod. And do I like that sort of design direction for the game? Yes. I think archers doing skill damage is like so beyond obvious. I love the developers are ultimately, seems like, moving in on that choice. But if that's true, what does that mean for cavalry? Like, look, if you were having me bet money on what cavalry were going to do, I would have bet you that they would have been the normal attackers, right? Like Attila Takeda was like your first insane normal attacker. And look, maybe they will be normal attack related, right? Like maybe Smite Damage is an infantry thing and sometimes a cavalry thing. Like, I don't know. But what I do know is that there are a couple things that actually scale up the skill damage that you deal. And we need to talk about those things to see if their value to you is going to change. And the main sort of weapons for enhancing your skill damage, weapons is not the right word because it's actually accessories. It's actually going to be not the 5% skill damage pendant. I own one of these. It was very expensive. I would say it's the worst legendary accessory I have. No, the pendant of Eternal Night, I mean, look, they could do something funky with skill damage. They could have some crazy mechanic, but we know how poison works today. Like, I don't think they're adding a different flavor of poison, unless what's in game is a typo. And like, hey, it could be, but I don't know why it's such a specific typo, right? So I think Pendant of Eternal Night, that ain't it. I think the thing that's going to be the jam is the Horn of Fury. And the Horn of Fury with skill damage boost, it's always insane. And it might not even be on the Hermann Prime march that you really want all those Horns of Fury. I mean, like, you might want them on all the other marches. If, in fact, Hermann Prime will clear his own stacks of poison, you might want him to slow down that rage cycle a little bit. Which is kind of weird that, like, you know, the devs throw at us all these commanders that enhance your ability to generate rage, but then also have commanders where you don't want that rage. But, I mean, look, Yoda swarms with Tommy. Tommy's still a thing, right? So, like, if we look at other accessories that tend to be pretty powerful in general, I mean, your Ring of Doom is generally pretty good. But I would say the thing that's going to accelerate your damage the most on other marches hitting things with skill damage debuffs is going to be that Horn of Fury for extra, you know, fast activations of your active skills that do skill damage. And also potentially the War Drums does a very similar sort of a thing. That would be a way, and there are many ways, but this would be a way to sort of enhance the skill damage you're dealing to a target. And in terms of what I think the right accessory breakdown is, I mean, you know, I can show you the accessories that I have. My money very much where my mouth is on this one. I think that if this skill damage meta comes to fruition, you can see here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 horns, right? And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rings. So 6 rings, a Greatest Glory, this stupid Pendant of Eternal Night that I will have to at some point dismantle, presumably. I mean, I don't know. So, you know, if they make it so that skill damage boosts on Hermann Prime somehow do other things as well, like, they could go that way, but it just seems complicated. And I don't know, since we know they're adding a poison, I don't feel like we're going to get multiple gimmicks in the same release cycle. Feels a little weird to me, right? So like I was saying, an ideal situation would be 7 rings, 5 horns, in my opinion, dagger, and a web. And I like the web for the debuffs here. Some people don't run the web. They run 2 daggers. That's a route you could go. You could run more horns and like, bro, generating rage, the more you generate, the more crazy that gets, which is where Trajan actually pops off. But I think I've covered this probably enough already. Of course, the equipment system is actually about to change in a really dramatic way. We're getting like a new iconic tiering setup. I covered that in depth with some very important reactions. Card will be in the end screen for that one in just a second. I hope you'll check it out. And until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom. Leave a comment with your thoughts on Hermann Prime. Man, kind of can't believe that he's doing poison. Poison's back, baby.